your mum at some point saw the results in you, and she had a problem. She started to deteriorate.
Yeah, this was very interesting. My mother's a very conservative, old-fashioned English lady brought up before the Second World War. She believes in all authority and certainly in doctors. But interestingly, as a child, she was always a bit suspicious of doctors who push drugs. We weren't given many pills when we were children. So there was something in her mind that was a little bit, she believed in nature and leaving things to its course. But up until the age of 80, this was a woman who'd hardly had a day's illness. And she had no time for illness. If you spoke to her about illness, she wasn't interested. And she used to find her friends who spoke about illness very boring. Yeah. And so up to the age of 80, everybody would say to her, Margaret, you're amazing. She would be up at 6 o'clock in the morning, going across the field with her Labradors and, getting her fresh air and sunlight, which is what she thought was and eating, good food. This is what she thought was the basis of health. And of course, there's some truth in that. But then everything changed during her 80th year. She developed arthritis of the spine, and she very quickly started to lose the use of her lower extremities, her limbs, her legs. And it went to a Zimmer frame, and then it was becoming more and more to a wheelchair. And then one day I just almost passingly said to her, have you thought of the Buteyko method? And I assumed she'd say, I'm not doing anything alternative. I thought that's what she would say. But she said, no, I'll do that. I'll learn that. And I said, really? She said, yes. I saw what it did for you. You were so ill and you're so much better. And I saw you doing this breathing practice and you talked about it. And it sounds, I can't think of anything else that helped. So she did it. And Christopher Drake trained her. And I did the bits in between during the day. But Christopher saw her for the 5 days. And she learned the method. She wasn't a very good student. There were certain principles she never understood. She never understood the idea of pushing pauses. Once she got to 60 seconds, she, in her own understanding, thought that's what she has to do every day. And she was a creature of habit, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But it meant that for the rest of her life, for the next 10 years, she practiced 3 times a day, before breakfast, before lunch, before bed, and she did 60 seconds 3 times. And, I taught her in those early days that she had to keep a journal, she had to keep a notebook and keep her scores. And she kept those scores, and all the numbers were the same for the next 10 years. So 60, 60, 60, 60, 60, 60, 60, 60, 60. And I tried to explain to her there's no point in keeping scores if the numbers are never going to change. But her attitude was, you told me to keep scores, I will keep scores. And so all I can say about my mother's practice is that it was regular and it was persistent, and she never stopped. And the thing that I noticed, and of course I was looking, and I tried to explain to my sisters, and I'm not sure they ever got it, is that my mother's deterioration in her condition was halted, or it was slowed down to such a point that it was almost imperceptible. During the first months of her, before she did the Buteyko method, of her diagnosis of arthritis of the spine, you could almost see her deterioration by the day. She went from walking to walking not very well, to Zimmer frame, to wheelchair. It was bang, 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 bang. And if I went to see her for a week, by the end of the week, she would be worse than she was at the beginning of the week, because I used to go and live with her and help out, But once she started doing the method, it leveled out. The deterioration leveled out. And as I say, it wasn't good practice she was doing, but it was regular. And then it slowed down to the point that you could hardly perceive it. And she had another 10 years of what she would say was quality of life. Yes, she wasn't walking through the fields anymore. She wasn't striding up towards the horizon, but she was, as she would put it, comfortable. She was able to do whatever she did, which was read books on, biographies on old 1940s film stars or members of the aristocracy, or farming books, or she'd watch her favorite daytime TV, and she enjoyed life. And most of all, She chatted with her friends, which she loved doing. One thing I ought to say is it wasn't just that her arthritis of the spine, the symptoms from that were halted or reduced to a point that they were imperceptible, but also what my mother noticed was a huge benefit in her mental and, most importantly, her emotional state. She would say to me, and she said it a few times, sometimes I wake up in the morning and think, well, I'm old and I'm paralyzed. What's the point? And she said, I would then do my practice. And as soon as my practice would be over, it would be as if the clouds had moved. And I would think to myself, well, I'm going to enjoy my day. She noticed very clearly, it was absolutely plain to her, that if she reduced her breathing significantly, her state of mind would move from one of negativity and hopelessness to one of clarity, and I can manage my life and I'm going to enjoy my life. The shift was night and day to her in terms of her emotional state, from what's the point to I'm going to enjoy my day. She became herself, because my mother was naturally a very positive person. Of course, her state would mitigate against that positivity, but the Buteyko method gave her herself back, her real personality. And I would say the same for myself. That's what the Buteyko method, reduced breathing, increased carbon dioxide does for people. It's not that my mother or myself are unique. That is pretty much everybody's experience from what I observe.
Yeah.
They feel themselves again.
Yeah.
And everybody's idea of themselves is someone who loves life.
Yeah, joy. Well, that's really inspiring.
She had another 10 years of what she would say was quality of life.